African. To you and welcome to Wednesday Palaver here on Pan-African Television. My name is Ivan Bant. As usual, I'm sitting in for your regular host, Comrade Kwesi Pratt Jnr. We're live across 46 African countries and other parts of Europe. We're live on Facebook at Pan-African Television. Do want to share with us your thoughts and comments on our platforms, and we'll gladly read it out to you. And of course, as the show progresses, we'll take comments and questions from our studio audience. In respect to the subject matter we're going to be discussing today. Well, today, topic tabled for our conversation is the aftermath, or perhaps the Kume Preko Reloaded demonstration. We are going to be discussing this very subject matter entirely, exclusively and extensively. We have been joined in the studio by a youth activist who goes by the name Oliver Baka Vormawor. We'll be having this conversation extensively. Now, you recall that last week, Saturday, quite a number of Ghanaians hit the streets to protest, to demonstrate, on several, on several, matters. Some of them were, the cost of living. Some of them were has to do with the fact that there's been quite a number of course, drastic, increments in fuel prices. The living standards have been skyrocketed and all that. So this was some of the conversation that were espoused by some of the demonstrators. So today, like I intimated earlier on, we're going to be discussing this matter extensively. So help me welcome our guest, Oliver. Good evening to you. How is it? Talk to us.
Me.
Of course, it's nice to have you.
I think that in terms of a lot of the demonstrations we've had in the past, I find that this one, it took me a bit more to recover.
That's very well.
It was perhaps it's an indication for me that I'm getting older than I woke up with much more severe waist pains.
But you were actively involved in the Fix the Country protest.
Yes. I mean, over the past year, we've had six demonstrations across the country.
Of course, yeah.
And we've been able to draw conservatively somewhere around 50,000 people onto the streets in the towns and villages in this country. So it's something we're extremely proud of. I think some of my fellow activists say that wherever there's a demonstration, even if I'm dead, I'll probably wake up and go for one.
Look like
protests, and I'm very interested in the burgeoning culture of protest in this country.
Now, you've mentioned that I mean, over the years now, we have had about 6 successful, demonstrations. To you as a youth activist, and of course, being part of all these demonstrations, what does this tell the Ghanaian people? What sort of message does it cut across to the Ghanaian people?
Tell you what, I remember this was in 2016, I think, or 2015, 2016. And I was in Brazil at the time, and there were some massive demonstrations going on. I was initially there for holidays, but I saw the demonstrations and I joined the demonstration, right? But one of the things that struck me was that people were coming to the demonstrations clad in their babies and walking the streets of Rio. And I thought to myself, I've never seen this happen on the streets of Accra. It always seems that there's a cultural reflex to view demonstrations as where persons who are not gentlemanly, persons of a certain social class would go to. It's not a place, or it's not child friendly in any event, right? And so it became an obsession of mine that to be able to reform conversations in the way in which we engage with authority in this country, we have to be able to build a protest culture. We have to see the going for a protest as a social activity to which we invite our grandmother and carry our baby along. That's objective for me. That's the kind of level of civic engagement I'm hoping that we see.
Right.
Now, when we started this, we said that we wanted to build a protest culture. In fact, I'm on record saying that I wanted to make protest sexy. Give me grateful for that. But yes, that's the whole objective, is to make protest sexy. Is to be able to appeal to people that the practice of coming out and to demand more and to be able to formulate democratic demands to persons we've elected should be in the ethic of what it means to be a citizen. So that's what I'm seeing happen right before our eyes. And I think perhaps a lot of people are missing this. But before we started Fix the Country and did the first demonstration, that activity had kind of died down within the space, compounded by COVID-19 and also the heavy-handedness of the regime. It made it such that very few people were willing to be bolder in coming out and do this. We're seeing that change. We're seeing a lot more people. It was like a flurry of activity of persons coming onto the street. But I think that a lot of things also have to change to kind of get to where we want to get to. But I think the signs are already promising.
Now, talking of a lot of things must change to get to where we want to get to. Now, let's narrow the conversation down to the economy. We appreciate what is happening now. High cost of living, increments in fuel prices, here and there. Markets, when you go to the market, quite a number of items the prices have skyrocketed and everything. Everybody's complaining about it. How would you describe the current state of the economy before we go to the Kume Preko demonstration? In your own estimation?
I think it was always fairly predictable that we'll end up here.
You saw it coming?
Anybody would see it coming. And it was, in many ways, it's irrespective of which administration we have. Because the basic structure of the Ghanaian economy is one that is clientele-like, right? You're entirely dependent on imports. We're entirely dependent on foreign investors.
Right.
The basic structure of our economy is one that it doesn't take much for us to get into crisis. It is not by accident that we are, I think, the 17th time trying to go back to the IMF.
Of course.
And even when you see the conversations around the IMF that we're having in town, it seems that there's a class consensus, or political class consensus that, the IMF is your friend, and then you go to them and they'll write you a check and everything will be fine. There's no rigorous engagement with why we continue to go back there, whether or not it is the right way to get our economy out of this crisis. So those conversations, I think that the economy is somewhere we're always going to be at. But I think that there's a bit of dramatic effect to it as well, particularly because we're in a time where beyond the economical issues, there are also governance issues. We're in face of a regime that has been heavy-handed in how he's dealing with critics, in dealing with journalists and all of that. That is it's a real sense of oppression in terms of our people's ability to speak up, compounded by economic anxieties, right? This is a trifecta of issues that is making a lot of people feel like we are on some edge or a tipping point that things could get south within some time. So I think that a lot of that compounding makes it like a really special time, depending on how you want to view it. And I think that we could be in for some dramatic changes the nature and structure of our politics and country generally.
But you made mention of the fact that we are in we're in special times, but fortunately, unfortunately, the current administration seem not to agree with such conversations when it's been espoused. I mean, they go ahead to tell you for a fact that yes, I mean, we have done free SHS, we put in a lot of money, we are doing planting for food and jobs, it's boosting agriculture, we are even importing, we're even exporting, farm produce and all that we are providing, like tomatoes for Ivory Coast and all sort of things. They are doing quite amazing in the industry as far as the economy is concerned. But so they keep on telling us all these, but does it really reflect on the economy?
If you go into my Twitter page here, there's a byline which I put there, which is that what is government if words have no meaning? I think that we are in almost like an Orwellian society where it's like newspeak. That words mean something different. You're able to hype up propaganda, and you're able to say things and get away with it because you know that it's an era of no consequences, right? There's no repercussions for anything you say. There's no repercussions for anything you do. So you can't say everything else. And it is why it is easy then to try to translate people's lives for them and tell them that they are living a different reality, when in fact people are experiencing something different, right? People are economically insecure. You tell them that no, it is detractors who are making it up. So you're not in fact hungry. The stomach rumblings are just your stomach dancing. Like you can say anything and get away with it. That's the kind of situation we are dealing with, right? And so I think that our body politic, unless the words of those who have given mandate to has some meaning, and when I say it has meaning, it means that there has to be serious repercussions to things you say. There has to be something which is, it's almost a sacredness about the things when persons in authority speak, because we have come to attribute some level of integrity, credibility, and serious-mindedness to some of the things that are said. In the absence of that, you have a regime that is only interested in self-sustaining itself in power. It will say anything, right? Because, I mean, it can say anything. So I think that's the kind of situation we are dealing with the kind of people we have elected and who have the mandate over us. And I think that if our politics will change, it has to start from that. Right? It's almost normalized in our body politic that we say things like when somebody's campaigning for office and gets elected, say certain things and makes certain promises and comes into office and doesn't do it. We say, oh yeah, but that's political speech. But what does that mean? Right? Like we've created a sense that it's fluff. It means nothing. So we're expecting of people to say whatever they want and get away with it in seeking power. I think that words and the things we say must carry certain gravity. Right. Because, I mean, it's 30 million people you're talking to.
Demonstrations. You think that demonstrations as it stands now, of course, in this part of our world, is meaning any meaningful strides? Because clearly, once the governing New Patriotic Party is in power, obviously once there's demonstration, you see elements of the opposition party also involved. Once the opposition party also gets that chance to also be in power, you see elements, and of course, things are not going as planned, you see elements of, the other political parties also involved. And we keep on demonstrating and problems keeps on impounding, it still becomes the same and all that. There's no clear change. Do you not think this is a systematic problem that needs to be changed? Because clearly we can go on and on and on and on and on, and we'll still be where we are, we'll still be talking about our problems and all that.
So let's take post-colonial Ghana. Ghana got its independence in 1957. Relatively young in the nation, in the community of nations. At the same time that we were having our demonstration, persons were on the streets of London, over 5,000 people, called Britain is Broken, doing a demonstration which in language was almost reflective of what we were saying. They were demanding that the government resign and that new elections be held immediately. We were on the streets for the first time in our democracy demanding that the president resign. And the historic nature of the demands we were making doesn't have to be underplayed. Now I juxtapose these two to tell you that when you take a country like Britain, which has made itself rich on the back of countries in the colonies like ourselves, but economically they have obviously been able to secure for their
for their people better economic circumstances than the vast majority of us. That the abolish politics, we have seen, what, 3 prime ministers in 2 months. And a lot of it coming from the demand of citizens that, no, you've conducted yourself in a particular way, and so you need to step aside. They've achieved all of that in their body politic, and yet people were on the streets making those demands. There's no point in a nation's history where demonstrations become written off, something that you do not pursue. It is the way in which countries sustain themselves and govern and develop better. Somebody said to me, it is almost unfathomable to have the president resign because you guys went on a demonstration, because we haven't created that culture where persons resign when there's, you know, lack of integrity or anything. And I'm saying, but how do you think that culture is created? That culture is created from these initiatives, right? It's created from persons saying that, okay, we saw these people on the streets and 1,000 Ghanaians on the streets on Saturday. On Sunday, we are going on the streets ourselves as well, right? Persons, labor unions are saying that we are also going on the streets to demand that the president resign because it's made the situation of the vast majority of the worker population in this country worse. Those demands have become normalized. You know, I saw somebody then, a lawyer, no means, calling one of the leaders of the demonstration, Martin Kwebu, that he needs psychiatric examination. And it was funny to me, it is important. I don't take these things lightly, because it's a reflection of the ways in which people relate to the democratic demands we're making. For so many people, they could not contemplate an idea that you could call on the president to resign. We're breaking that, because I'm very committed to shifting our imagination beyond the status quo, to normalize things which we think we cannot ask for. And I think the demonstrations like this and things like that are important. And at every point in time and in every part of our history, we're going to be pushing the barrier a bit more. And people are going to be able to say that it is okay to go and sit on the front lawns of the Flagstaff House or Jubilee House, as you want to call it, because I'm poor and I have nowhere else to turn to. Right? It's going to be normal. We have to be able to get there where we understand that the duty bearers owe us a certain responsibility. And when they fail in that duty, we can ask certain things of them. That's what I want to see. And I think the demonstrations provide a conveying belt to be able to articulate ourselves in that regard.
Right. Now let's talk about the Kume Preko demonstration. From what you said, do you think that the demonstration that was held on Saturday achieved its intended purpose? Because I don't know for a fact that you were part of the demonstration as well. Do you think it achieved its intended purpose?
You can think of purpose in 2 ways. One, the overriding objective for us is that we want to be able to create an ecosystem that gets the president to resign. Okay? In that regard, we've set and processed a motion for that. And it is only the beginning. I don't think that this is an individual who was refused to sack his cousin, the finance minister.
Right.
This is an individual who went about bragging that he asked the Minister of Health to go on leave when there were demands for him to resign because Ghanaians would forget anyway. This is a president who has supervised the greatest environmental destruction that this country has ever seen, and yet has not called the Minister of Environment and Natural Resources to step aside. Right? There's no sense of accountability at the highest levels. Even persons at the presidency who were caught on tape taking bribes in relation to environmental destruction are still being kept.
With all these things you've mentioned, the president has been, cited, mentioning that these are his favorite members of ministers.
What does that
They are
tell
doing
you?
extremely well. He mentions that.
What does that tell you? There's an absence of responsibility taken, and there's no demand on the president to do different. So I don't anticipate that this person was going to be moved by one demonstration. I think that we have to raise the temperatures. We are not there yet. And I think that, because if we were in a democracy where, persons had a certain shame about themselves, I think that while we're preparing to do the demonstration, the president will be making a different kind of address to the nation.
Yeah.
Right? So I don't think that we are there
Like what happened in the UK, where prime ministers resigned.
I don't think we are there yet. I think that this demonstration set off that motion. Now, we were planning to have, when I say we, I say Fix the Country.
Of course, yeah.
The movement that I mobilized with.
Yeah.
We're planning to have a demonstration. In fact, in our discussions, we plan to have a northern sector demonstration before coming to Accra. So we're planning to start with Tamale and then come to Accra. Now the plans for Tamale are still in the works.
Still in process, yeah.
Moving to Tamale, because what we do is that we spend about roughly 30 days doing door-to-door mobilization, talking to people, holding town hall meetings before a demonstration. So people usually see the demonstration, but they don't see the back end of what it entails. And when Martin Kpebu announced a demonstration, which is on November 5th. Now, when Martin announced the demonstration, we weren't contemplating having a demonstration. And we kind of waited to see what the reaction was going to be. We're very interested in what he was saying about the call for the president to resign. And we wanted to see how it will play out in the general public, right, in terms of strategy. Then we saw that a number of MPs, you know, on the government bench,
right.
80 MPs, were calling for the finance minister to resign. And then almost immediately, they backtracked. So when that happened, we became immediately concerned that we're seeing a rise in crescendo in the demands for something to happen. But the backtracking, we feared, would put the president in a stronger position. Because that's the nature of politics. So we said to ourselves, if the political class were kind of dropping the ball on this, then we have to propel the demand from the streets. And so we had a conversation with Martin. Now, Martin, bless his soul, his heart is in the right place. And I'm very happy that, you know, one of the things we've been calling for is that we need to build a critical mass of people speaking up.
Right.
And the fact that he stepped onto the plate, I'm very happy about it. But Martin has never organized a demonstration before. So he assumed that, you know, he went on national TV and made a call. People were spontaneously going to show up on the day. You know, so we met with him, I think, about 4 days to the demonstration. We said, oh, no, it doesn't work like that. So we became immediately concerned that if we do not deploy our resources,
that's true,
there were very few people who were going to show up for the demonstration. So we committed ourselves to bring at least 1,000 people there. We think that a demonstration of this magnitude, if we had brought in other stakeholders, we could have brought even a lot more people onto the streets. But it became critical for us to at least marshal initial support and tell ourselves that this is only the beginning of a push of an idea or a conversation. And so that when we have that initial push, we can then sit all stakeholders on side and say that, listen, the president is preparing, the president and his cabinet are preparing to present an IMF inspired budget in a few days. There's going to be a lot of things that so many people won't like about that. It's going to be a lot of useful things around which we can bring a lot more people onto the board and mobilize around. So I anticipate that what you saw was an appetizer of sorts, that another one is going to happen. But immediately now, we are committed to Tamale. Right. Because one of the things we have always said in the beginning was that our call was fix the country, not fix Accra. Yeah. And so it's important that we decentralize the whole conversation. That's true. That we're able to bring a lot more villages and towns into the conversation, and to provide that platform that persons outside of Accra find the space for being politically conscious. So we are going to Tamale, and we're going to be working there to be able to deliver for the first time the Northern Sector demonstration.
Now, you mentioned, in your submission, you mentioned that you'd realized that Martin Kpebu had not even organized any demonstration before. And so clearly it was important that you merge resources, mobilize resources to make sure we had a successful demonstration. Now, right after the demonstration, I mean, quite messages that were popping up on social media had to do with the fact that there was a low turnout for, you know, a demonstration was concerned, because obviously you can't just go on national TV and think that you're just going to call out people and they'll just be on the street and all that. Now, talking of the low turnout, would you also say that it's as a result of what happened in the Arise Ghana demonstration, where quite a number of persons were injured, violence characterized the whole demonstration? Would you say that that could also be a factor to what we saw?
Tell you what, I've organized demonstrations in this country, a number of them for sure. The last demonstration was the first time I saw journalists wearing bulletproof vests and advertising their bulletproof vest on social media.
Just Saturday's demonstration.
Yes, they were going to be attending the demonstration. Yeah. I thought it was curious. I thought it was something that we haven't reflected on. That how are they reading the times we are in? For them to say that, you know what, to show up at the demonstration, I need to be wearing a bulletproof.
Bulletproof, yeah.
You know, a lot of us were wearing T-shirts, right? But I thought it was curious and I thought it was interesting. A lot of people were sending messages across social media and on WhatsApp and other platforms saying that there was going to be tremendous violence, and so people shouldn't turn up at the demonstration. I know a lot of, at least from Martin's side, which told me a lot of people who are prominent, who had been interested in coming to the demonstration, but at the last minute have been advised that they were going to be, that there was going to be incidents of violence, and for their own security they shouldn't come up. I don't know whether the regime was behind it or whether the images from an Arise Ghana demonstration previously contributed to that idea, but there's no doubt that so many people anticipated and feared for their lives in going for the demonstration.
Right.
It became critical then for us that to be able to build a protest culture, to be able to carry one's grandmother and one's baby to a demonstration, you have to feel a sense of security around the demonstration. And that is why it has been very important to face the country, and we have been always championing this question about even the fact that the police are carrying guns around the demonstration and the appearances of weapons around demonstration, that we need to reflect on them as a society. Because it is critical to how we put people in security and making them feel safe in coming out to demonstrate. So I know that this demonstration, there was a lot of people who were anticipating that we're going to have a lot of casualties. But I have promised myself, and so far after 7 demonstrations, the country has not been involved in a demonstration where we have lost a single soul. I have promised myself that the casualties that we will register in our democracy will stay in the elections that people go for, because that's why it seems that people die, but never in any of our demonstrations.
Right.
Because it seems to me that our political class has become comfortable with those deaths, to the extent that I am not. And I don't want anybody's child to come to any demonstrations we organize and die. And so to that effect, we don't leave that to accident. We put a lot of work in building crowd control marshals, because our policing has no effective crowd control measures. We make sure that there's very little interaction as much as possible between the crowd and the police. Because the only source of violence at demonstrations in this republic that I know has come from when the police interact with demonstrators. Demonstrators do not cause violence. The violence is brought by those who are supposed to protect demonstrators. And so that's one of the key things, differences that we make, that has made sure that our demonstrations have always been safe.
Now, one of the messages that was sent across while the demonstration was ongoing has to do with the fact that, and of course, Martin Pebu, eloquently expressed that and made a call that the president must resign. And does this protest gives a clear indication that Ghanaians are tired of this president, and for that matter, they want him to put his tools down and resign as a president?
You know what? I said to some people that when I was stepping out of my house, to the demonstration, I was going as an individual. And it was deeply comforting to me that I saw over 1,000 other people there who had also showed up and believing in the message that the president ought to resign. Now, because we are usually fixated on the boots on the ground, we missed the 24,000 people who were on Twitter, who were re-echoing the same sentiment using Kume Preko hashtag and calling for the president to resign.
Yeah.
That is important.
Of course.
There's a huge constituency of people who are now become bolder in asking, saying that no, the buck stops with the president. And no matter how tyrannical he wants his regime to be, we would say to him, lay your tools down and go. For me, I think that there's definitely a lot of room for us to be able to amp the demand for him to step aside. Okay? There has to be definitely a lot more coordination between us, folks who are mobilizing people in the community to come out and express themselves, and organized labor. Our independence was achieved on the back of demonstrations and strike action. I think that when you pick the currency of Ghana, right, it is 6 individuals who are only famous for going to jail because of protest. Meaning that protest was what won us independence. And I believe that if we're going to be able to be successful in kicking this president out, it has to be through that same mechanism. Now, when you look at the placards which are the demonstration, because I'm a big reader of placards, the conversation wasn't only centered at let's make some changes at the top and everything else is fine. The status quo is deeply broken. So there was a lot of calls for changing of the status quo about the main 2 political parties and the way they govern. But also long-term demands around a new social contract. We've been calling for a new constitution for a new generation.
Of course.
We were centering that conversation as well, because we have to be sure that quick fixes are not going to get us out of this quagmire, but long-term integrated solutions that are consistent and have a sense that bring everybody on board, and that have a sense of what the real problems are, and also fashion out much broader solutions that engulf that encompass the entirety of our society.
Now, talk of constitution, I think just yesterday on one of our sister stations, I heard a legal practitioner clearly say that if we're calling for the resignation of the president, I mean, in the constitution, in our laws, I mean, the president hasn't conducted himself in contravention to any law in the constitution that seeks to suggest that the president must resign. So why are we calling for the resignation of the president?
You know, one of the bigger problems of our democracy is that we've handed off public discourse to lawyers. And a lot of the times, these are lawyers who are not socially conscious, and the legal training, in fact, doesn't equip a lot of lawyers to be reflective beyond the narrow textbook. And so people are reading and translating democratic and political demands and saying that, show me in the Constitution where it says, after one demonstration, president must resign. That is whittling down the conversation, right? But you're not going to find it written in the textbook and say that on so and so day, if 2,000 people come onto the street, the president has to resign.
Right.
We have to go back to an understanding that our constitution is the political document, first of all. It's a political document that captures the soul of the nation and is supposed to be a guide towards a certain future. Now, in that guide, it contemplates, first of all, that sovereignty or the mandate of who, when power, or if you take the preamble, it says that the source of all power and the framework of governance emanates from us, the people. Okay? So if you think about it, what the Constitution is saying, essentially, it means to me then that if people to whom sovereignty resides come together and say that we want to withdraw the mandate from the president, it is constitutionally appropriate to say that they make those demands. Nowhere in this world is it a prerequisite that a president must break a law before he's asked to resign. Okay? It calls about the moral integrity of the office, and that if the president fails in that moral duty, doesn't show the integrity of that office, he can be called on to resign. In fact, when you take the UK example, nobody can say that Liz Truss broke any law,
of course, before
she resigned, right? Nobody can say that Theresa May broke a law in resigning. So it is not only that.
Moral integrity.
Yes, even in terms of being accountable for decisions that are unpopular, it's a basis for resignation. When Neville Chamberlain went to negotiate with Hitler for the appeasement, it wasn't because he broke any law. In fact, it was approved by the British Parliament. But he was still made to resign when it became unpopular that no, why negotiate with Hitler rather than a different response? So at nowhere in any country is just the breaking of law a condition for resignation. But let's think about the breaking of law a bit more, because we are not honest people. When a lady who came up, self-confessed the president's girlfriend, talked about how the president has used the national security to attack her, kidnap her almost, right? There was radio silence across the country, whether it was the bar association, the churches, or all those conservative voices that consider themselves as guardians of our democracy. Everybody was silent. The media wasn't talking about it. All the media people said they were afraid to talk about it. Now, if the first gentleman of this land can deploy the national security of this country in order to go after a citizen, if I was arrested by the national security of this country and tortured and held in jail for 35 days without any formal charges against me, and all those things, we don't see that they deprive this democracy of some essence, and we don't think that that is breaking the law enough to hold the president to account. I don't know how else we want to hold the president to account. Maybe we can continue to fast and pray.
Do you think the president listens?
Well, the question is, what is he listening to? Is more the appropriate question.
Because I have engaged Professor Makoba, who happens to be a lecturer at the University of, Kwame University of Science and Technology, and he clearly has even written an article on that, and he clearly intimates that on several counts he's written letters to the president. Once we were even entering into this economic quagmire, there was some sort of cause that he put out and all that, but the president never listened, which is why we are here today. Do you think he listens?
What is the consequences for lack of listening? For me, that's what I look at. What happens when you don't listen? What happens when they lie? What do we do as citizens? We don't do anything. We accept it as such. And for which reason? What is the moral incentive for the president to do otherwise? There's none, right? So as long as there's no, again, punitive mechanism that ensures that the president is disciplined and listens, as you would put it, he has no incentive to. And where there's no incentive to do anything, why bother?
Because one of the fundamental, things you must know or perhaps you must have as a leader is the ability to listen to perhaps followers or your subordinates. So once you don't listen, there becomes a problem.
You know, you remind me of something. Around when Face the Country wanted to organize its very first demonstration on May 9th, and they used their favorite tool, the courts, to block it and ban us in perpetuity from ever demonstrating. We decided to go online, right? And we said to people, you know, we're doing a virtual protest on May 12th, I think. And as this was going on, the finance minister schedules a session to speak to Face the Country and people generally calling for Face the Country about some of the things they are doing and why people should listen to them. And then I was called, I think, by one of the sister stations, Joy, to react to it. And I said the biggest failing here is that on the one day that the citizens of Ghana were speaking out, the administration chose to speak over them rather than sit back and listen. And we've seen that happen. Just recently, the government released like a whole statement about how the government machinery was going to be responding to people and issuing statements. It's a government that has only known one playbook. Where propaganda fails, pump more propaganda. And that's, so they will speak over us and they'll talk more because, again, they control us. They call them media assets, enough to be able to seek to drown out voices. But I'm grateful that despite all the noise and all of what it entails, we have been able to find a space for people to be able to, at least to assure ourselves that, you know what, you're not losing your mind. You're not insane. And I'm saying that for me, my advocacy and activism, it's what gives me mental sanity in this asylum.
Right. So I'll quickly chip this in, but before I do, okay, so let me do this first. Let me take your thought on this. Once we're done, I would engage the studio audience and they'll share with me their thoughts and comments. Then we quickly move to Kume Hack, who's going to share with us some messages that have come on our social media platform. Now, once the call for the Minister for Finance came in, and of course, some members of parliament, 86 members of parliament also, joined the force and says that they wanted the finance minister to resign. I saw a post, whether true or not, but it's about a thinking. And it says that the finance minister says, or made that statement, that he thinks the call by Ghanaians for him to resign is neither here or there. One, because he's a finance minister and he takes instructions and calls from the economic management team, which obviously is headed by the Vice President, Dr. Baumia. And so if we are calling for anybody at all to resign, it should be the head of the economic management team, which is Dr. Baumia. What do you make of this? What do you make of this statement?
Well, rather than speculate on whether or not he did in fact make the statement, I would be actually very surprised that anybody within this administration would say that somebody bears any responsibility at all. In fact, they are not quick to admit that there's any responsibility on their part for anything. But I like the word neither here or there, because I remember when they were proposing the e-levy.
Right.
And because of the kind of pressure we're giving them, they decided, okay, fine, we're going to hold town hall meetings across the country. And so we decided to get young activists across the country to go to every town hall meetings and ask them questions.
Right.
And one of our young activists asked the finance minister, are you contemplating a reduction in the emoluments and salaries and privileges
of course
ministers and
of
other
course
people? And he said something about how, these people do a good job and they are, do an important job. And so the call for them to reduce their income is neither here or there. I remember that very well, right? And for me, it always reminded me of, so yeah, what are you going to do about it? I remember in the talk of, when we're talking about the president renting private jets and insensitivity.
Of course, yeah.
And he kept doing it. Because the politics was, what are you going to do about it? I've done it. He can decide to buy the private jet. What are we going to do about it? It's a democracy without repercussions. And as long as you have a democracy without repercussions or anybody to hold anybody's account, the government response is,
neither.
What are you going to do about it?
Yeah. Yeah. Right. Thank you very much. So I'll quickly move to the studio audience, and I'll take a few messages and comments from you. So, okay. So I have you say 1, I have you 2, I have Karis 3, and I have you 4, and Hack 5. So I'll start with you, sir. So can we have the microphone, please?
Thank you. We are learning. I want to say something concerning president breaking the law.
Right.
I think right from his first, when he won the first election, and they were swearing him in, the speeches he made alone tell that he's a liar. See, he took speech from the American President George Bush and
The plagiarism.
Clinton, yes.
Yeah.
That alone is enough for us to know that the man have nothing to tell us than what other people said. Two, when we have the election and some people die, up to today, maybe I've never heard the president come to say anything to the nation concerning the people who died. This alone is enough for us to say this man doesn't fit to be in this office. Thank you.
I agree.
Right.
I agree. Just a little comment. I mean, in universities across the world, right, self-respecting universities, any student that plagiarizes is dismissed from the school.
Of course.
Right? It has punitive consequences.
Yeah.
How much more the first gentleman?
Of course.
What kind of country are we? You know?
Let's have you, please.
Okay, so Mr. Baka, you've spoken at length. My name is Daniel Kabnassari, again, obviously a fan of the television. Quick one. You, from your introduction, from your preamble, you said you've been in 6 demonstrations over the years. That's fine. Please, has this protest you've been through yield any better results? And if yes, Mr. Baka, is demonstration the best way to go in order to salvage the Ghanaian economy? 2, you being a convener for the Fix the Country protest, what are some of the measures you're putting in place to educate the ordinary Ghanaian who are solely interested in shifting blames to the government over the economic crisis? And at the end of the day, these same people some of them happen to be traders at the other side of the fence, will go to market, buy a commodity for 5 cedi and come and sell it for 20 cedi, and all what we hear from them is massa. You understand? Yeah. So what are you doing about it? Because it's not all politicians that plays a dirty game. You understand? So I just want to have a clear.
Okay. So Oliver, I want your opinion on this. In fact, this government is suffocating us beyond what we can bear, and from children, aged, youth, everybody is feeling it. We have done our protest. That's the best we can do as a people. Yet he's still on the seat. What do we do beyond this protest? And my second question, you made reference to the fact that politics must change. What do you mean? Pragmatically how? And how can that ameliorate the livelihoods of people, improve the economy? And finally, some time ago, you didn't want to engage in media house, and your reason was that what journalists do is to recycle news, and so you didn't want to engage anyone. What, in your opinion, what should the media do, or how do you want the media to position itself to help in development, or to become a formidable tool for development?
Thank you.
Okay, so the rich get richer and the poor get prison. If we all realize there are some crimes committed by the poor, which I would say in a bit negligible, they'll be jailed. But when a rich does that with a pen, he or she will be protected by the law. Now 2, you realize that the chemistry of the game is money. Like Malcolm X once said, the media is the most powerful entity on earth. It has the power to make the innocent guilty and the guilty innocent. That's power. The media houses in this country are not participating in advocacy. They're all quiet. They're all scared. They're all timid. 3, we've realized that when we were young, National Commission for Civic Education was educating the public on civic rights, responsibilities and all. They don't have enough resources. But during the COVID, we realized that they were giving some number of pickups just for, I don't know if it was announcement of COVID or so. During the electioneering period, the pickups were taken from them and rebranded as political tools. And we sat down, we never said anything. The onus doesn't lie on Oliver Vormawor and lawyer Martin Pebu and the rest who are doing the fight for us. The churches, civil society must play a part. It is not Yemfamanyami. God is in heaven and we are here in hell suffering. We have to ensure that the natural resources, in fact the resources we have in this country, are utilized for the good, for all, not for a few. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for the presentation. I'm Abdulhaq, a member of the Socialist Movement of Ghana. You've adequately done the presentation to suit what the demonstration seek to achieve, which you highlighted that we need the president to resign and we need to increase the momentum. I mean, we all read and we listened to Mr. Martin, lawyer Martin Pebu, and the question that hits me is just what next after they resign? You yourself admit that since the overthrow of Kwame Nkrumah, the current system we operate as a country has been at the detriment of our success. We've been reversing backwards. So if you agree that the system we are operating is a problem and you are just providing us with a solution to take off the president, after taking off the president, what is the next stage? So what do we do after getting the president to resign? Are we going to maintain the same structure, or are we going to input another person to just sit in because we trust him, and then wait for 4 years to know whether it's going to deliver something good? So in essence, I'm asking, what is your alternative to the system?
Right.
Hello, we are very grateful to my good friend, Vormawor, for this enlightenment. But I've just got only one question. What's the relationship of Fix the Country, your movement, to the other organizations who are almost all the time also requesting for the resignation of, especially the opposition party, the main opposition party, I mean?
Okay.
Yeah. The second aspect is to when you ask the question about the success of the demonstration that happened on Saturday.
Right.
I think it's also part of the reasons I think why people didn't really come out to demonstrate on Saturday. I think we added some division when we were calling for demonstrators, whereas we are saying that it's not an NDC demonstration, it's not an MPP demonstration. So if you are aligned to MPP or NDC, that means it automatically excludes you. So if someone is an MDC sympathizer and is thinking, okay, this demonstration is about the plight of Ghanaians, I'm a Ghanaian before I'm an NDC member, that means I'm inclusive. But when the message about it being distinct from the ordinary people who have alignment to any other political party, I think it turned people off also, and that is one of the reasons why some of us didn't come.
All right. Okay. So, Oliver, over to you.
Thank you. A lot of questions. I'm grateful that I think that the worst thing that could happen to any attempt to engage and be in the conversation is to finish and everybody's like, no question.
Yeah.
I'm really interested, happy to see that there's a lot of engagement and we have solicited a lot of reactions from you. So what I'll do is I'll take them seriatim as they came, one after the other. Six protests you've been involved in, 7th now. What are the benefits? Was the question you asked. Now, I do not take for granted that each demonstration in itself is a successful, to use a double demonstration of civic engagement. That any time citizens come onto the streets, they are doing something beneficial to our democracy. I remember when I was in law school, and the constitutional law lecturer, Professor Kume, had said something. He was commenting on the fact that after the 1992 election, the main opposition party, the MPP, wrote a book, The Stolen Verdict. And he said something that ultimately it was better for our democracy that in the time of such deep frustration and anger over the election, the main opposition party chose to write a book. And every time citizens demonstrate, meaning that they are deploying a democratic tool, because the demonstration is a tool in our democracy, we must be grateful that they have chosen a democratic response to whatever situation that drove them to demonstrate. So I think that is in of itself a beneficial mode of civic engagement. Now, one of the things that we have to be able to understand, and I'll perhaps put it, yes, so when we are talking about whether we should demonstrate and whether we should think about two other forms of actions and things like that. One of the things I always say to myself is that when you take any country in the world and you take their legal framework, right, you take a constitution and our laws, for every wrong that exists in a society, whether somebody slaps you, the law will make a provision for what you can do. Either you can go to court, or that you can report the person to the police. There's always something, there's always a provision for some administrative remedy for a wrong you suffer. But despite all of these things, it still made provision for people to demonstrate. Demonstrations in themselves don't solve anything. Unlike when you go to court, you can expect a judgment at the end of the day, right? Or whether you go to the police, you're expecting that there will be prosecution. But there's nothing you can expect that will result from a demonstration. In fact, you don't need a reason to demonstrate. I always ask myself, why is it that after all the fact that we've taken enormous care to ensure that any wrong you suffer, you can have a remedy for it, we still allowed for people to demonstrate? I believe that it comes from a recognition that throughout history, the most biggest changes that societies have gone through has always come through demonstration. People coming onto the street, whether it's the right of women to vote, whether it's the right of blacks to vote, whether all kinds of rights which were won through people going onto the street. And so demonstrations in and of themselves, like I say, are an avenue to formulate democratic demands, which the society would then contemplate and sit with as to whether or not they are still being made to us as a reflection of the critical mass of people and asking for something. That in itself is a success on itself. Secondly, a lot of people say to me all the time, you know, the government is uncomfortable about demonstration, why don't you do something else? And I say to them, if power is uncomfortable with demonstrations, then that's what we need to do more of. Because there must be a reason why I woke up on a Saturday morning and I said, I want to keep fit, so I'll walk. And it generates the most attention and news ever. And all I did was walk from point A to point B. That's all the demonstration entails. I might sing along the way, but I'm not doing anything different from somebody who goes up the mountains on a brie on a Saturday or a Sunday morning. Why does this single act of just walking hold such potential or capture people's imagination that much? It tells me that there's something there, and that it's a tool, we have to think of our constitution as a toolbox. When we open it up, we have to either we are picking up a spanner, we are picking up a screw, or whatever it is. It's a tool in a box, and it's a tool that we must be able to understand that it has this place and value, and we must use more readily. And I say more readily because the last Afrobarometer survey on Ghana said that 86% of Ghanaians said they've never been to a demonstration and that they were not looking to go for one. That's bad. A demonstration is a democratic option that exists to reform our policies to hold governments to account. But the vast majority of our citizens say, no. Why? It has a long colonial past. It was a colonial project to ensure that we do not come out to protest the colonial regime. So for me, it is a success in itself to just see people come out and do something. I hold it in dear regard. Now, in terms of our own activism, and the kind of things we want to see change. Now, it depends on whether or not you're thinking of change in terms of something that crystallizes, maybe a law has changed or somebody resigned or something. That's where you're seeing change. But just take for the fact that in response to fix the country's demonstrations and activism, the government decided that, okay, they were going to parade ministers every Sunday to come and tell you what they are doing. Because maybe people are not hearing enough of what they are doing. That's why maybe we're angry. It's a change in the way in which the government engages its citizens. And one of the things we've always complained about is the gap between the governed and those who govern. And so that if anything that gets them to change, because there's no requirement, there's no reason why they would do that. But if there's something that changes the ways in which they engage with us, because they're hoping for some benefit from it, but it allows us to be able to discuss government policy more, it's a win in itself. So that's how I would see it. The second question, you said measures we are putting in place to create responsibility and what people are doing and things like that. You know, in Face the Country, we're developing a charter. One of the things we've settled on as going to be the tagline of Face the Country for us is demanding better, doing better. Implicit in that is a recognition that there's an individual role that we all play in society. I am playing that role by the fact that I'm speaking up and holding my government to account. We all do that as individuals in our own way. But I, as an individual who understands the vast resources and the machinery of government and what it can do, the power of the office and what that power can do in a society where I've seen it being so abused, I'm very unforgiving. And I do not place the government and the state on the same pedestal as individuals and explain the same level of responsibility for them. We cannot equate that. If not, we'll be killing our own ability to be able to hold government to account. The government is way much more powerful than we are as individuals. And we purposely created it so, because we were hoping that in creating such a powerful tool, it will use it to serve us better. It will protect our liberties better. It will enhance social equities better. Because as individuals in our individual capacity, we cannot reduce social inequality. I understand that our time is either up or almost up.
Up already. But let me give you the opportunity to just answer one last question, then we can just close. Just one last question. One last question.
How must policies change, maybe? I'll take the question on how, when I say how must policies change?
Yeah.
I think that for me, of a person who's of a more social orientation vis-a-vis how the state should engage a citizen, I think that one of the things we need to be able to change in our politics is the culture of patronage. It weighs heavily on the National Democratic Congress, it weighs heavily on the New Patriotic Party. And because of that, they look almost the same.
That's true.
Because of the culture of patronage, people are unable to speak up. And all look at the vast level of youth activism we are seeing. Yet it is in these times that we are seeing the youth wing of the NDC or the youth wing of the NPP become completely, almost useless, I would think. It is in this time that the voices of youth is being much more leveraged. I would think that the kind of level of engagement I would see from them, I'm not seeing that. So I think that it owes to the culture of patronage in many ways, the ways in which, you know, people kind of expect to come up. But there's a lot more I would have said, but I don't own the channel.
We'll try this some other time. Thank you so much for your time. I'd like to say a very big thank you to our studio guest for making time to be with us. And of course, we've seen the WhatsApp and the Facebook messages that have come in, but unfortunately, time is not on our side. We'll try as much as possible to rearrange this conversation again, and we'll gladly read your messages out. Up next is News Break with Ivy Abdul. Stay with us. I almost just up here.